let's go through Donald Trump's recent shenanigans in reference to Ukraine. Every signal I see is negative. Every signal I see, from the meetings I'm seeing him having with foreign leaders, to the way that other people in his administration is talking, to just the way that Donald Trump talks about it on his own. There's one little piece of hope today that we're gonna take a little bit of a hopium pill, but let's first eat the grueling grog of the truth. Let's open with Donald Trump's post yesterday on the anniversary of the Russian invasion, February 24th, posted by Donald J. Trump on Truth Social. Today, President Emmanuel Macron of France joined me in the Oval Office to speak to the G7 summit. The meeting was convened by the governor, Justin Trudeau of Canada. Now, he's saying Governor Justin Trudeau because his whole shtick is Canada's an extension of America and we're going to take it over, etc. So he's continuing the stick. The current chair of G7 to acknowledge the third anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine war, which would never have started if I was president. Everyone expressed their goal of seeing the war end. They emphasized the importance of the vital critical minerals and rare earths deal between the United States and Ukraine, which we hope will be signed very soon. This deal, which is an economic partnership, will ensure the American people recoup the tens of billions of dollars in military equipment sent to Ukraine, which also helps Ukraine's economy grow as this brutal and savage war comes to an end. At the same time, I am in serious discussions with President Vladimir Putin of Russia concerning the ending of the war and also major economic development transactions, which will take place between the United States and Russia. Talks are proceeding very well. So, he has a meeting with Trudeau. He had a meeting with G7 summit, Governor Trudeau, Emmanuel Macron. Few things about this. I emphasize the importance of the vital critical rare earths mining deal, which is an economic partnership. It's not an economic partnership. It's not an economic partnership. It's not an economic partnership if you say, give us 50% of the gratuity on all of your resources and your critical ports and all this critical infrastructure and the rights to this and the rights to that, and in exchange for the aid we gave you that we told you was aid and you weren't going to have to pay back. And to be clear, he's saying to recoup damages. And what he's asking for is $500 billion. $500 billion worth of rare earths and minerals on top of critical ports and infrastructure and exclusive rights for $110 billion of American assistance. That's how much has been sent.
Occurred
It just
is occurred.
doesn't really make sense, does it?
Razamancer has donated $5. Here's some money to replace the fursuit you lost in the fire.
Thank you. It was a cheap fursuit. $5. My goodness. And with googly eyes on it. Oh my God, a $5 fursuit. Okay. Emu fursuit. But this isn't an economic partnership. This is, you're indebting the Ukrainians to the United States. And that's why Donald Trump said, that's why Zelensky said no, and he didn't accept the deal. And now they're going back and forth. Donald Trump's national security advisor, Mike Waltz, told them to basically shut up and take the deal. They shouldn't be so loud about everything. And the Ukrainians wanted they wanted the better deal rather than signing away half of the resources for stuff that is not of equivalent value. You know, they're signing over, something of 400 to 500% more value. And then they're getting no more aid in the future? This is just to cover the stuff that's already sent? Why? And here's the problem. Here's the problem with this arrangement from Donald Trump's angle. And this would be my advice if I was the Ukrainians and this was the deal, as we're talking about it right now. And this was all Trump was offering. And there was no movement, which I'm hoping the Ukrainians are moving on. I would tell the Ukrainians not to take the deal. I would tell the Ukrainians not to take the deal. People might call me crazy for this, but if this is the deal that Donald Trump is pushing down their throat, which is 50% of their resources, $500 billion worth of value, plus their ports, plus their infrastructure, for aid already sent, for nothing else, for aid that we never said was aid. What we're talking about is worth so much more in value. You're taking advantage of Ukraine's extremely unfavorable position under the barrel of Russian invasion to try to colonize them economically. And that economic colonization, even if they were to win the war, completely push the Russians out, which you're saying you're going to help them at all in doing. In fact, you're committing to no assistance whatsoever, is going to make it so much more difficult for them to rebuild. They talk about an economic partnership, but to help them rebuild. How does it help them rebuild to take the wealth out of Ukraine with nothing in return? That's not an economic partnership. That's a resource extraction deal benefiting solely the United States. I mean, imagine you're manning a Ukrainian air defense system. You then accept all these unfavorable terms, only to learn that the ports that you were defending the whole war as an air defense operator is now owned by the United States, the country that just sold you out. Does this sound like an equation for stability, or a way to improve our image in the eyes of the Ukrainian people? Because here's the problem. The Ukrainians can always just say no and not take the deal. Or if they do take the deal, the Ukrainian people can say no after their government said yes. And you might say, oh, that's kind of hard to believe, but you can ask that to Yanukovych. Now, here's the thing. Some might say, like, Dylan, if you don't take this deal, then what about support from the United States? Well, here's my problem. He's not offering support from the United States anyway. This is him. Give us money. We give you nothing. Then we tell you to accept the Russian deal. The Ukrainians would be better off literally doing nothing else. The Ukrainians, by staying home and engaging in no diplomacy, they would be better off than taking this deal if those are the terms on the table. Because at least that means they still have mineral wealth. In fact, it might be better to take that same deal, offer it to the Europeans for actual defense articles in the future instead of stuff already sent, and then that's a better way to do the same deal. Even though that still might not be a good deal, because you don't want to sell out your future for the immediate. But you also have to survive to day 2 in order to plan for day 2, no? Either way, any other deal with any other party would be better. It would make more sense for them to say, I'll give all of our lithium to France if France does X, Y, and Z and sends X, Y, and Z, than it would to be, I'm going to give all of this to the United States because they said so. You're not even strong-arming the Ukrainians anymore. You're basically pushing them away. Is it possible that future regime in Washington might return the rights? It's possible, settle all the debts for $1 or something, but I mean, do you want to should the Ukrainian people just hope out for that? Hope that, when President Gavin Newsom gets elected, or whoever it would be, that they're gonna not want that anymore? They're not gonna want the crazy terms? All hail President Newsom. Okay. Anyway, I am not a big fan of the sentiment expressed by Trump, but you know who else isn't? Emmanuel Macron, the person he had a meeting with. And they did have a press conference after the meeting, and I wanted to show you 3 moments from this meeting that I thought was funny. The first one is just Macron, who's still a big supporter of Ukraine, who Donald Trump is saying should put his soldiers in harm's way in Ukraine while the United States does nothing. They don't put their soldiers in Ukraine. They don't do that. He wants Macron to send his troops to Ukraine, and Macron is sitting here to try to figure out exactly what that long-term deal probably could be. That's probably what a lot of their meeting had to be with. Anyway, Macron, knowing that it would be his troops in Ukraine, knowing what Putin has done, knowing how he tried, Macron himself and his administration tried very, very hard at the start of the war to try to avoid a war, much of it documented and publicized now, is next to Trump calling Russia the aggressor. And look how Donald Trump looks during this segment. Just look at the expression on his face as Macron describes Russia as the aggressor in this war.
Than the other. You can take the proceeds from it. How can you not take
Because
that?
it's very different. You keep the assets, you take the proceeds because they are paralyzed in a certain way. You take the proceeds during the wartime, but you keep the assets, and it's part of the negotiation at the end of the war.
What they're talking about right now is you take Russian assets, and whether or not you keep it for leverage or you spend it all for Ukrainian defense articles, or et cetera, et cetera. Look, if the hope is you hold it as leverage so you can get the Russians to rebuild Ukraine, I just don't think that's really practical. But I mean, I think you should just use them for how you can use them. But we'll see. Anyway, continuing.
Because, I mean, this war costed all of us a lot of money. And this is the responsibility of Russia, because the aggressor is Russia.
Should the U.S. be compensated?
So at the end of the day, this frozen asset should be part of the negotiation, all in all.
Will France support the U.S. being compensated?
I support the idea to have Ukraine first being compensated, because they are the one to have lose a lot of their fellow citizens and being destroyed by these attacks. Second, all of those who paid for could be compensated, but not by Ukraine, by Russia, because they were the one to aggress.
Isn't it crazy that there's no talk about Ukraine getting any compensation? That the country that's going to be left indebted from the war is going to be Ukraine by us? That it's not, oh my God. Just the dynamics of this are so fucked up on its face.
Again, just so you understand, Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
Oh, okay. Now this is great. So you see how Trump's talking about this right now? This is Trump's new argument, right? Because it's just a flat out lie what he says most of the time. He says that we've sent so much more than the Europeans. This is a lie. The Europeans have sent more than us. It's been like this for almost 2 years now, and I've been reporting this for over 2 years now. The numbers are clear. They're all public. Like, not all of them are publicly available, but a lot of them will not include like the specifics of what's being sent, because for like security reasons. It depends on which country you're talking about. But Europe has sent more than the United States to Ukraine, period. And this has been the case for 2 years. And now that he's president, journalists are starting to at least somewhat like, okay, Mr. President, I guess we have to spend the time to push back on this. Either because they were lazy and they didn't want to do it on the campaign trail, or the ones that were doing it were just not getting the platform, not getting the attention, whatever it is. Now that he's president, there's more journalists and there's foreign journalists. And so sometimes there's journalists who get in there that haven't been exhausted by Trump, and he hears them lie, they jump on it a lot quicker. You'll see that a lot more with the foreign press, that Trump hasn't properly beaten them into submission yet. So, you know, they're not getting like CBS to settle, right? You're not going to get that with the BBC. I mean, you got that with, I can't believe you got that with Edward R. Murrow's publication. I can't, that's terrifying, horrible. But at the end here, his new argument is, well, actually, Europe might have sent more, but that was loans. That was loans. Europe has loaned Ukraine everything. We have just given it. So we want to be returned our stuff because Europe is not giving stuff. They're just loaning it. And Macron just said, no, this is a lie, and immediately started rebuking him right in front of the press. And Trump did not look happy.
There was a one to aggress.
Again, just so you understand, Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total effort, and it was through, like the US, loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money. To be clear, we have 230 billion frozen assets in Europe, Russian assets, but this is not as a collateral of a loan because this is not our belonging. So they are frozen. If at the end of the day, in the negotiation we will have with Russia, they're ready to give it to us, super. It will be loan at the end of the day, and Russia would have paid for that.
If you believe that, it's okay with me.
Mr. President,
But they get their money back, we don't, and now we do. But you know that's
We will
only
fight
fair.
both.
Mr. President,
You see what Trump just did there? Macron just took Trump's head, and in my mind, he just beat it on the pavement. Trump made an accusation. Macron then goes out there and says, no, this is not the case. What we're talking about is possibly getting the Russians down the line to compensate us because we're holding on to Russian assets. What are you not talking about? And he's like calmly, concisely explaining. And then Trump at the end of it says, they're getting paid back, we're not. And so I guess what Trump's message on this is like, wait, so the Russians might have to pay back the European, or well, if the Europeans are getting paid back by Russia, then I guess we got to get paid back by Ukraine. Is that the thought? Because I don't think the moral logic follows, because it was Russia who initiated the problem. It was Russia who initiated the war. It was Russia who caused the economic problem that would make compensation necessary in the first place. I don't think it follows. One last thing, and I thought this was funny. This is the look on Emmanuel Macron's face as Donald Trump says, "I don't use the word dictator lightly," a few days after describing Zelensky as a dictator.
If you called Zelensky a dictator, would you use the same words regarding Putin?
I don't use those words lightly. I think that we're going to see how it all works out. Let's see what happens. I think we have a chance of a really good settlement between various countries. And, you know, you're talking about Europe.
He's exhausted as the rest of us are, man. He's probably more. He has to be in those in private meetings. Oh my gosh. You can see just the question and the dreadful response. You can see the moment where he is shot. Like, oh, of course, well, yeah, of course, Putin's a dictator, but he's a mean guy. So what? It is what it is. That's what he was probably expecting. Look at this moment. This is a second before he doesn't answer. This is right when he does. You see that little? You see that moment? You see that little? You can see. You can see it. You can see it register in his face so clearly. Oh my God, it's painful. Oh, that's funny. Oh my God. Oh my. Oh. He's dying inside. Absolutely dying inside. Did you see the BBC reported that Putin is open to giving access to minerals to the USA? Yeah, I heard about this. I heard that one of the deals could be that the United States is trying to get minerals out of Ukraine from the Ukrainian side, and then in exchange for letting the Russians hold occupied Ukraine, they would just demand that they give America the resources out of occupied Ukraine. So they would be not only pushing forward the Russian occupation, but then directly profiting off of the Russian occupation. But we don't know if that has been picking up or anything. This is just one thing that has been thrown out there. Now, moving forward, this is something that happened the same day as this meeting where Donald Trump refused to call Putin a dictator. On the same day, and we've reported this before, but when you think about this news schedule, start the day, refuse to call Putin a dictator, call Zelensky a dictator, then say you don't use the word dictator lightly. Then at the end of the day, have the United States vote against the resolution to condemn the Russian invasion and demand them to withdraw from the country. Putting the United States with some strong allies such as North Korea, Belarus, the Russian Federation, and Israel, actually. Israel. Oh, and Eritrea, which is referred to as the North Korea of Africa. Not good company, I would say, in large part. Not good company. Not great. Okay. So, in this moment, this was such a break in the Western Alliance that there was a question about the United States actually getting their resolution that they tried to introduce that was countering that, which did not blame Russia, which did not demand their withdrawal. They actually tried to get that one vetoed. France and the UK considered it, but then stopped, and they abstained, which is again showing the deterioration of the Western alliance on Ukraine. And you could see this tension between Macron and Trump as their perspectives on this war and this unity in those backing Ukraine breaks apart, which was the Russian strategy, which was the Russian hope. The Russian hope was that the backers of Ukraine would eventually fracture, split, divide and conquer, and then get terms favorable to them. And that seems to be, on the American side, that's where the fracturing is happening, which is, going to lead to some interesting changes on some Wikipedia pages in the near future. I want to throw you guys something, though. Throw you guys something interesting, something fascinating to me. Right here is a message from Zelensky where he's responding to demands from Donald Trump to have elections in Ukraine. And this was expressed to him by the Russians, and now he is saying, hey, I'm going to repeat this to you. Now, he's not saying that, but that's what's happening. And there's no other explanation as to why Donald Trump all of a sudden would give a fuck if there was elections in Ukraine. He does not care about democracy. He does not care about democratization. If he did, why is he sending weapons to Egypt or Saudi Arabia or any of these other countries that doesn't give a fuck if they're democratic or not? And why is he completely violating his own country's elections? Either way, he doesn't care about it being a democracy. It's because the Russians think they can make the country more vulnerable by either attacking their election systems or suspending the martial law, either of those. And you would do that before you had an election, which would mean Ukrainian men could go overseas, especially if they think the war is going to kick up again and they don't want to get drafted. So it could be a mechanism to weaken the state, or it could be a mechanism just for Ukraine to have another election. And that's the risk. And so the defense from the other side, though, on Trump's side is, well, actually, the real reason this is happening is because Zelensky doesn't want to have an election because he's a dictator. That's why Trump's calling him a dictator. That's why they're saying he's a dictator. So Zelensky has responded to this claim at a press conference saying that he will resign from office. He'll step down in exchange for NATO membership or real security guarantees for the country, which has currently not been offered to him in any conversation with the United States since Trump has entered the White House, as far as we know. If it's about peace in Ukraine and you really want me to leave my position, I'm ready to do that in exchange for peace. Secondly, and exchange it for NATO. There is such an opportunity. I'll do it immediately without a long conversation about it. I am focused on Ukraine's security today and not in 20 years. I don't plan to be in power for decades. The Ukrainian Rada just had a vote to reaffirm that Zelensky's the president and that they're going to have elections once the war is over. And there wasn't a single person in the Ukrainian Rada, which is their parliament, that voted against it. Not a single legislator voted against it. And those are not all Zelensky's party. It's not all. There's opposition in the Rada that said, no, yeah, I don't like Zelensky really, but he's our president right now, and he will be our president till the war over, and then we will run against him, and then we'll beat him, or we'll beat whoever else runs in his place. That is not an uncommon position amongst the opposition. But he's described as a dictator, while Trump refuses to call Putin one. Again, this is negotiating on behalf of the Russian position, not the Ukrainian position. And I wanted to show that this, again, it extends to other members of the administration. When J.D. Vance probably said one of the most repulsive things about the war since he's entered office, during my Senate campaign, and this was posted today, like just 5 hours ago. He edited it. I don't know how he edited it since then, but he did edit it. During my Senate campaign in 2022, I met a Ukrainian American man in Ohio. He was very angry about my views on the conflict and my desire to bring it to a rapid close. You are trying to abandon my country and I don't like it. Sir, I replied, your country is the United States of America. So is mine. So it's just like a cutesy answer. Can I just, that's a non-answer. That's a non-answer. Okay. J.D. Vance, I think we should never give Israel a single bullet ever again. I think we should stop all the bullets. I think we should stop all the aid. I think we stop all the intelligence sharing. And we, honestly, like, all we should have there probably is like an embassy, maybe. What? You don't? You want to keep saying it? Well, I'm sorry, man. I love America. I love America, man. Aid to anywhere is America. Somebody could make an argument from an evangelical position about the need religiously to support Israel. Someone can make a security arrangement, like we need to pivot out of the region, so we need them to work with the Saudis against the Iranians. You can make any number of arguments for why you could consider continuing to support Israel. But if I was to just say, like, if my only defense of that was, well, this is our country, or this is, this is our country. This is not a response. This is a cutesy slogan. This is politicians speak. This is the type of stuff that you have like a marketing team go through. Somebody can believe that American credibility matters. Someone can believe that if America makes an agreement with another country that we should stand by our word and we shouldn't act like snakes. Somebody can believe that deterrence is a real thing and that it's effective and that economic and geopolitical stability in Europe is beneficial for the United States, is that Europe has backed us up and we should back them up, that nuclear non-deterrence and non-proliferation, nuclear non-proliferation is important, and trying to uphold the agreements we made for that foundation is important. Like, someone can make a million different arguments, and your argument is love America. That's what this is. It's, oh, you care about Ukraine? Why don't you love America? It's not an argument. Imagine anytime someone, Dylan, we should send aid to so-and-so because they've got an infectious disease that could spread across the borders and do this and then destabilize the grain, which then would bring up global prices, and we need to send it. Love America? Okay, I care about America. It's not an answer. It's just slogan. I hate. They're supposed to be the non-politicians, but the most politician that has ever politicianed. Continuing. I always found it offensive that a new immigrant to our country would be willing to use the power and influence of their new nation to settle the ethnic rivalries of the old. One of the most important parts of assimilating is seeing your country as the USA. It's part of the bargain. If you're welcome into our national family, you want to look out for the interests of the United States. I know many immigrants who have the right perspective, and I'm grateful to them. For example, I have many Ukrainian Americans during the campaign and since who agreed with my views, or at the very least, asked the right questions. What is the best interest of the United States? Okay, so to be clear, the Russia's invasion of Ukraine is an ethnic rivalry of old. Okay, it's just an ethnic rivalry, right? It has nothing to do with us. Nothing at all. We just kind of inserted ourselves because of the Ukrainian deep state. You know, the Ukrainians are puppeteering of politicians. Okay, they were like, we must bring back the Zaporizhian Cossack hetman, and they decided to send the javelins, right? It's because of the Ukrainian immigrant deep state or whatever. Look, here's the first thing, okay? This is not an ethnic rivalry of old. Of course, there is like tensions between the Russians and the Ukrainians, but when you call it like an ethnic rivalry, you make it sound like, oh, there was like a village massacre here and there was a village massacre there, and we're choosing sides between like two peoples that have just been kind of like going at it forever for like, they've conquered their land, they've conquered their land. The Ukrainians did not attack, they were attacked, and it's been like that for a decade, that this invasion has been perpetuated by the Russians. We got ourselves involved in the 90s. Now, you might think that we shouldn't have, but we did, and so we are. When America makes a commitment, it doesn't just change that America made that commitment because you're the new guy in a suit in DC. Other capitals see a continuation of the United States today and tomorrow. When I die, when you die, and all the worms are eating us, when that's happening, the United States is supposed to continue, and the agreements that we made during our lifetime as representatives of the United States or as citizens of the United States, those agreements are supposed to hold until the United States gets rid of them. And when they get rid of them, that should be at a time that does not violate their credibility, and it should be not necessarily 100% a mutual agreement, but it shouldn't be a rug pull, which is what's happening now, because rug pulls undermine credibility. And so when you talk about like, oh, it's an ethnic rivalry, what he's trying to do is downplay any commitment we actually made. Like completely discounting any commitment, discounting the security interest. He says, oh, we need to care about a security interest, discounting any type of deterrence, and just boiling this down to like, you know, the Guatemalans and the Hondurans, they just don't like each other. It's just like, you know, just like that. And it's not the largest war in Europe since World War II, and Russia trying to challenge the post-World War II standard and the post-Cold War standard for territorial rearrangement, which is not brutal territorial conquest in the manner that they are doing. And it's just an ethnic rivalry. He's trying to downplay it. He's trying to pillow fist it. He's trying to pad it out so it's easier to swallow abandoning them. And then he gets to the second half, which is like the loyalty of the immigrant. These immigrants, are they loyalty to you, or are they loyal to Ukraine or America? Now, I think this is showing another part of the administration that isn't necessarily what they wanted to show, but it is what I'm seeing. And again, this disdain of expertise. See, if you're a Ukrainian American and you're pissed about the abandonment of the country, it's not because, well, they're Ukrainian and I'm Ukrainian. I'm sure that seeing your home village burned to the ground is not positive, and you'd like to stop that. But if you boil it down just to as simple as, well, that was my home before, so we should do something, I think you're kind of downplaying everything that's happened in the war. It might be that, you know, they're angry about the war crimes. They're angry about the kidnapping of children, maybe the mass graves, the bombing of hospitals, the shutting down of evangelical churches, the shutting down of Protestant churches, the shutting down of really anything that's not associated with the Russian Orthodox Church. Whether it was the suppression of protests, the seizing of people's property, the mowing down of people at checkpoints, any of these things could anger them. But what could also be angered by is the United States making an agreement and then backstabbing them, going back on an agreement. That could anger them. It could also anger them a lack of knowledge about deterrence. They could also be studying the war more than you because it's their home country and they know more about it and they know more about their country. And your lack of knowledge about their country and your lack of care about their people wrapped in a fake blanket of concern for the civilians rubs on them the wrong way. Especially since J.D. Vance said on the campaign trail, literally, I do not care about Ukraine. I don't care. He said he literally didn't care when he was running for Ohio Senate. Then his campaign had to walk back the statement because they had a decent amount of Ukrainian Americans in their district and they were scared of losing those votes. So now he's acting like he was bold in the campaign trail. At the time, his campaign did a walk back. They did a full walk back. My goodness. God, but this hatred of the expertise. So I think I had one last thing I wanted to go through on Ukraine on this, and that has to do with the mineral deal that we were talking about. So the mineral deal that we've been discussing up to this point has been that Ukraine has been sent about $110 billion in aid. And when I say it has been sent, that doesn't include the stuff that was replenishing stockpiles, you know, the stuff that was rebuilding American factories. I'm just talking about the stuff that actually, you know, is going to Ukraine. Now, some of that aid is sitting down and is not being sent over. For example, $3.8 billion in Presidential Drawdown Authority has not been sent over to Ukraine. It's just sitting there. And, you know, Donald Trump has apparently zero immediate intention of sending that over to assist the Ukrainians, if any intention to ever send it over to assist the Ukrainians. I have yet to see it. I hope I will see it. But we're not seeing any movement. And so $110 billion in exchange for $500 billion of mineral value, critical ports, critical infrastructure, it just doesn't really seem all that fair. And so today, somebody asked, like, Mr. President, what are they going to be getting in exchange for this deal? Because they already have the aid. They already have the other ones, equipment that was loaned, you know, the stuff that they're going to have to already pay back on top of this new commitment that they're asking the Ukrainians to make. They already have all this stuff. What are we going to give them? Because, I mean, like, why would they take a deal to give up all this wealth for nothing in return, just to be nice to America? Now, I understand that you're undermining your own leverage in the side of the Ukrainians and negotiating with the Russians, but, like, do you understand leverage this little? But Trump responded. $350 billion. $350 billion, you know, that's still not enough to make up the value of what's being asked for, but it's still a lot more than what's been talked about before. Then he said lots of equipment and military gear and the right to fight on. The right to fight on. So, on its face, the right to fight on, BS. Okay? The Ukrainians don't need Trump to give them the right to fight on. When you survive another day, you have earned the right to fight on. No other man can give it to them. The Ukrainians have to earn it, and they have. Lots of military gear and equipment. I assume that would be attached to the $350 billion. Let's listen to Trump say this, because this is the first time Trump has given any indication that he might actually send more military aid to Ukraine in this recent kerfluffle.
With Ukraine and this mineral deal,
Let me turn this up.
With Ukraine and this mineral deal, what does Ukraine get in return, Mr. President?
$350 billion and lots of equipment, and military equipment, and the right to fight on, and originally the right to fight. Look, Ukraine, I will say they're very brave and they're good soldiers, but without the United States and its money and its military equipment, this war would have been over in a very short period of time.
Now, let's start with the positives. If this is true, this indicates a continuation of aid to Ukraine. And $350 billion worth of military aid would be a real substantial amount of aid. Now, how that would be broken up, when that aid would arrive to Ukraine, all of this stuff would matter. Because if it's $350 billion over a decade, well then that's not going to do much help in the immediate sense, is it? If it's $350 billion in the next 3 years, well then we've gotten somewhere. We've gotten a continuation of support. We've gotten Ukraine a foundation, right? Now, again, this is not me saying that this is a fair deal. This would still, even with the $350 billion, still not match the resource wealth he is asking for in return, on top of the value of the critical ports he's asking for and the critical infrastructure he's asking for. So it still is not like a dollar-to-dollar equivalence, but the argument a Trumper would say is Ukraine's not exactly in a good position. Now, I see Ukraine getting attacked by a large imperial power, the largest nation on earth, with an intention of completely capturing the state, completely capturing the nation, and erasing Ukraine off the map, then being boxed between them and the United States as they continue to ask for support, who is now trying to bleed a stone dry. And I look at that completely sympathetically, and I don't think of like, oh, how can we strong arm them? This is a good negotiating position. That's how they're thinking. They're thinking about Ukraine's in a bad position because if they say no, we walk away, then they don't have American military support. So we can get a good deal for us. We can get more value for the bang of our buck from our military aid. And so, yeah, we'll take some extra value off the top. That would be their argument. And I would disagree with it towards the ends that we're trying to reach, because I think that Ukraine being stable, Ukraine being wealthy, Ukraine, being able to rebuild, I think these things ultimately benefit the United States more than us bleeding them like a rock. We probably could have just traded for these resources in the private sector to begin with. It's not like the Russians would be the one trading for it. They obviously have Moscow and Kiev has a little bit of a problem right now. But that's how they see it, as a strong negotiating position. What would this mean for Ukraine? This would mean a continuation of support. This would mean that Europe would not have to go it alone, and they would have some more time to build up the military infrastructure that they must use, because it cannot be, yes, the can has been kicked down the road. Let us now wait another 3 years for another crisis and then think about acting then. No, you would have to act now. You would have to act right now. But here's the problem. All of this could give somebody some hope, if still not grumbling at the nature of the situation and the deals that we made in the past and the fact that we should honor them for our own credibility's sake. But I gotta pop this little hope bubble, because while this is what I would prefer to hear, this is how I think people are engaging with this. Right now, people are scared. They're thinking about Pokrovsk falling. They're thinking about the rest of Toretsk falling. They're thinking about Konstantinivka, Kramatorsk, Slovyansk. They're thinking about all these towns and villages that are still going to be occupied. They're thinking about all the children that have been kidnapped. They're thinking about a lot of stuff right now. And they're looking for a path out. They're looking for a way out. They're looking for a life preserver. They're looking for a ladder as they're down a cliffside. A rope. And this is the rope. This is the ladder. This is the line of support that is being dropped down to the Ukrainian people. And so they've grasped it. They're like, finally, something. We can get another bullet in the gun to help the Ukrainians survive another day, which is the first step towards any victory. Here's the problem. I don't think this is true. I don't think this is true. I think Trump is lying. Now, I honestly, and this is how little I think of him, I don't even know if he knows he's lying, which I guess would make it an untruth or not a lie. I don't know how intention changes. The point is, I don't know. Here's the problem. Donald Trump goes out there and he'll say stuff and he'll spin stuff and he'll flip-flop on stuff so constantly, and he'll shoot so much for the hip that he'll throw statements out there, and I'm not exactly sure what the president of the United States is saying. See, if we take the president's words here literally, what he is saying is that the Ukrainians are going to get $350 billion in return for $500 billion worth of mineral value. Now, that seems like not the best deal for the Ukrainians, especially when you add the other parts of the deal we're not even discussing really all that much. It's all just concentrated on the minerals. But that, taken literally, it's like, okay, it's bleeding a stone dry, but we see something here. Here's the problem. You know what I think this is? I think this is one of two things. One, this is something where he's shooting from the hip and then he'll walk back on it later and it'll go back to you just paying the old stuff. Or two, and this is the one I suspect, he's talking about aid already sent. See, when you and me talk about aid already sent, right? You and me, you, the viewer at home. Yes, you right there, Philip. But no, when you and me talk about this, we talk about the actual aid numbers. We go say, okay, 110 million sent, 175 billion total, but of that 175 billion, a decent amount of that is factories in the United States. So counting that as aid to Ukraine might be a little bit of a misnomer. And, you know, if you also need to include the restocking of American stockpiles, if that's not sent to Ukraine, should we include that in? And we get to about 110 million. But even if you stay at 170, go all the way up to 200. Okay, I see some people say 200 billion. If they're being generous, sometimes they'll even include the loans. But even if you include the loans, even if you include the American military factories, even if you include the American restockpiles, you'll nowhere get anywhere near the $300 billion that I kept hearing Donald Trump saying that we sent over to Ukraine. I don't know if you guys, if it was something he said it so much, I can't remember when he started saying it. If it was after he got elected or before he got elected. But before he got elected, he was making up numbers too. But the numbers, since he's been on the campaign trail, continue to have gone up. Nina, thank you so much for the raid. I appreciate that. Thank you. Originally, it was something like 200-something billion. Then it was 250. Then I heard something like 300. And you want to know what the recent number I heard from Trump is for what we sent over to Ukraine? The numbers that I were hearing for the last few months was 300 billion. That we had sent $300 billion to the Ukrainians and got nothing in return. Not true, a lie, but the number has to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger to help his point. The last number I heard him say was $350 billion. I think he could have meant to say, because he got his lies and his messaging so confused, that he meant to say that we've already sent $350 billion. But the reporters in the room know that we haven't sent $350 billion. They might actually know the real numbers because they might research the issue. And so it gets reported because that's also how he says it, because he says it either wrong or he means to say it one way, says it this way, or however. He meant to say that we've already sent $350 billion, a lie, fucks up his lie, says we're going to send $350 billion, and now that's how it's getting reported. As Trump declares we're going to send Ukraine $350 billion after he messes up his lie that we've already sent them $350 billion. Messing up a lie so bad you make it into a aid security commitment. This is what I believe to be the case. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but you want to know what would be the best case scenario? Trump asked about this, like, did you mean to say? And he's, no, I did mean more aid. Yeah. 350 billion in new aid. Yes. And then he just goes with it. That would be the strategy. Okay. But point is, this is what having a bad communicator at the top means. It means that we have to play interpretation with the president's words because he doesn't know the issues. He doesn't trust the regional experts. He shoots from the hip. He fumbles and mumbles on his words in a way that many people used to talk about Biden doing. And sometimes he just speaks in a flat out, just confusing manner. And this is one of those instances, and it just so happens to also entail the lives of tens of millions of people and hundreds of millions to billions indirectly. Now we know how to manipulate Trump, just string him along with leading questions. Maybe that is the strategy. Maybe that is the way to go.